2 years she danced in his shadow, cooked for his friends, stitched his medals to his uniform, only to be left alone in a hospital bed while he ran off with a prettier lie named Clara. But death didn't take her. Fate rewound the clock. This time, she didn't beg. He trained. She outranked. She outshone. And just as he knelt with a shattered knee, discharged in disgrace, she stepped onto the podium with a medal on her chest, and a baby in her belly, fathered by the man who truly saw her worth. Revenge didn't need blood. It needed glory. And she made sure they watched every second of it. In my past life, I died on a cold operating table. Not in an accident. Not even from illness. I died because the man I loved gave the order not to save me. Victor Lang, my husband of 4 decades, stood outside the emergency room in a starched military uniform, looking more like a polished officer than a grieving spouse. She signed the DNR, he told the doctor. Why? I never signed a do not resuscitate order. But he did. For me. On my behalf. And they let him. Years of overwork had worn my body down. I collapsed while preparing for his retirement ceremony, hauling crates, coordinating flowers, cooking for 20 of his comrades. And when I fell, clutching my side in pain, Victor didn't panic. He didn't rush to my side. He looked relieved. I remember blinking against the fluorescent lights, waiting for his voice, his touch, anything. But he never came. Instead, as my heart monitor went flat, somewhere in the distance a television broadcast lit up the hallway. Victor was on screen, smiling, composed, his silver hair combed immaculately. Clara Wu stood next to him, glowing in her tailored cheongsam, the crimson sash of a National Arts medal wrapped around her like a ribbon on a gift. They held hands. For the safety of my family, Victor said, voice full of contrived regret, I had to keep the truth hidden. My wife and children suffered in silence while I fulfilled my duty to the nation. But now I can finally love openly. The camera panned out, capturing their 2 grown children, both unmistakably his and Clara's, smiling proudly behind them. That was the moment I realized. My entire life had been a lie. The sleepless nights, the rations I sent to his mother and younger siblings, the stage roles I gave up so Clara could shine. Every sacrifice I made was for a man who used me as a shield. A ladder. A cover. The woman he truly loved had been standing beside him the entire time. Not me. Rage didn't consume me right away. Grief did. A howl tried to rise in my throat, but the white-hot sensation in my chest drowned it out. A violent surge. Like lightning. A crackling, impossible current tore through my soul, and I felt myself snap in half, then splinter into a million pieces. When I opened my eyes again, I was 18. The army base's shared telephone line crackled in my hand. I blinked, my vision blurry. The receiver was warm against my palm, the spiral cord coiled tightly around my wrist like a tether yanking me back from death. Elena. My father's voice, General Raymond Rivers, boomed from the other end of the line, stern and commanding. I hadn't heard his voice in decades. Not like this. Not this strong. The second son of Commander Chin is already a brigade commander at 25. Isn't that good enough for you? He said. If you insist on staying with Victor Lang, then don't call me your father anymore. My heart lurched. In my past life, this was the moment I chose wrong. I had cried. Screamed. I gave everything up for love. My relationship with my father, my honor, even my future on stage. I accused him of being an elitist, of not understanding love. I called him cold. I told him he didn't know how to love his daughter. And he, being a veteran hardened by war, simply cut the line. But this time, I wasn't the same girl. I remembered how he held me when I returned from the front lines once, my feet bloodied from dancing on broken terrain. I remembered the silent care he gave me when I was sick, how he kept a photo of my mother tucked inside his military notebook like a fragile secret. He wasn't cold. He saw things clearly. It was I who had been blind. I clutched the receiver, my fingers trembling. Dad, I whispered. I'll listen to you. There was a long silence on the other end. Then the faintest sigh. Not frustration, relief. I gently hung up the phone. My knuckles were white. My chest was heaving with a kind of grief I couldn't name. Not for the father I lost, but for the version of me who never listened. The version who died for nothing. The liaison officer standing beside me didn't seem surprised. She was young, with warm brown eyes and a smudge of ink on her cheek. I remembered her now, Lin Mei. She was in charge of base communications in my early days. General Rivers still doesn't like Victor, huh? She said softly. Can't blame him. You're his only daughter. No father wants to watch his girl suffer. I smiled weakly. He saw everything. Long before I did. Lin tilted her head. You okay? I nodded. Better than I've been in years. She paused. Well, does this mean you're going to meet the Chen boy? I hesitated for a moment. Chen. In my past life, my father tried so many times to introduce me to him. But I refused. I thought I had found the great love of my life in Victor Lang. I didn't even know Liam well. He and his father transferred bases when we were 10. But I remember he once gave me the larger half of a steamed bun after I'd been punished without lunch. I remember he cried harder than I did when our pet rabbit died in the compound yard. He was quiet, bookish, and always had a runny nose. That sickly little boy grew up to be a brigade commander. Yeah, I said finally, almost surprised by my own voice. Tell my father. I'm willing to meet him. Lin's eyes widened. You mean, Liam Chen? Are you serious? That's the youngest brigade commander in the entire division. I gave a small smile. That's what I heard. She blinked at me. What made you change your mind? I met her gaze and gave the only answer that mattered. I've already lived once for the wrong man. This time I won't waste another breath. That night I stood at the edge of the dormitory courtyard. The wind was sharp but not bitter. The scent of iron and earth filled the air. A few soldiers jogged in the distance. The sky above was split by stars. I turned my gaze upward. In my past life I stared at this same sky while waiting for Victor to sneak out and meet me after hours. I waited many nights like that. Sometimes he came. Sometimes he didn't. Sometimes he was with Clara. I used to make excuses. I used to believe the best in him. I used to think if I just worked a little harder, gave a little more, loved a little deeper, he'd finally see me. But I see clearly now. Victor Lang never wanted a wife. He wanted a cover story. And I gave him the perfect one. Not anymore. I returned to my bunk that night and dug into the trunk by my bed. Inside was the journal I kept at 18. In my past life I'd filled it with poems for Victor. Lyrics. Sketches. Wedding fantasies. Now I ripped out the first page. Then the second. Then every line that began with, Dear Victor. In the last few pages I scribbled a single line. From today forward I live for Elena Rivers. No more shadowed corners. No more stagehand roles. No more apologizing for being the daughter of a general, a soldier, a woman. I closed the notebook and let the silence settle in my chest like peace for the first time in 2 lifetimes. By noon, the military base cafeteria was alive with noise. Forks clinking, trays sliding, boots echoing across the linoleum floor. I walked in humming a tune I hadn't thought of in years, shoulders light, spine straight. And then fate decided to test me. Elena. Victor Lang's voice cut across the room like a blade. I turned and met his face, flushed, furious, and entirely theatrical. He stalked toward me with Clara Wu 2 steps behind him, clinging to his sleeve like a helpless sparrow. She didn't even try to make eye contact. You stole Clara's food coupons, Victor snapped. You know she's frail. She needs those. The room began to quiet. In my past life I might have gone red with shame, tried to explain myself, made excuses. Not this time. Oh. Said calm. Funny because I distinctly remember her offering them. Clara tugged on his arm like a wounded actress. Victor. Please don't argue with her. It's not worth it. She's the general's daughter. Victor's voice rose, furious and performative. Chairman Mao taught us everyone is equal. Even if you were the chairman himself, Elena, that doesn't give you the right to bully your comrades. He didn't stop there. Today I'm putting an end to your arrogance. And before I could react, he lifted his bowl and poured his steaming hot noodle soup down my front. Gasps erupted all around. The soup scalded through my shirt and clung to my chest and sleeves. A few drops hit my neck and shoulder, stinging. But the pain wasn't nearly as sharp as the humiliation. Everyone stared. Clara, wide-eyed, immediately rushed forward and began dabbing my arm with a handkerchief. I recognized it instantly, navy blue with white stripes. I had embroidered that cloth for Victor a week ago. Elena, I'm so sorry, she whispered. He didn't mean it. Please don't tell General Rivers. I'm a dancer, I have to stay light anyway. You're really helping me lose weight. It's not a big deal. Every word. Soft, calculated, sugar-coated poison. In my past life this was the part where I broke. Where I cried and begged people to believe me. But not this Elena. I shoved her handkerchief away and stepped forward. Clara Wu, I said, voice steady and sharp. You gave me those coupons. Voluntarily. Why are you pretending otherwise now? The silence that followed was almost reverent. Clara faltered, her lip quivering. Elena, I didn't mean to cause trouble. Victor stepped in front of her protectively. You're lying. Clara barely eats as it is. She sends her rations home to her family. She only gave you anything because you pressured her. He turned on me. Not only do you bully comrades you lied to? Is this how your revolutionary father raised you? I narrowed my eyes. Why do you always drag my father into this, Victor? You talk about him more than I do in a year. He's my father, not yours. He blinked. The soldiers around us didn't move, riveted. I turned to Clara again. If I'm lying, then say it out loud. Look around this room. If you never offered me those coupons, tell everyone now. Clara's mouth opened and closed. She stayed silent. But I wasn't going to let this slander go unchallenged. Again. I stepped up onto a bench. Elena, one of my dorm mates began, but I held up a hand. Since Clara can't speak up, I said clearly, I will. Last week she snuck into our dorm and stole my dress and shoes. He was caught. Red-handed. When we confronted her, she cried and begged me not to report her. In exchange, she offered to pay me back in food coupons, month by month. Another collective gasp. Several heads swiveled toward our dorm's corner table. Right on cue, two of my roommates, Lon and May, stood. It's true, Lon said loud and firm. We saw her return the dress and shoes. Elena didn't want the coupons. She was trying to let Clara off without punishment. She said she just wanted to take a photo to send home to her mother, added May. She altered the size, stomped the shoes through mud, and cried when we confronted her. Victor scoffed. She was just trying to reassure her family that she's doing well. It was a harmless mistake. A mistake. I said coldly. She destroyed the last pair of shoes my mother gave me before she died. I never even wore them. She knew what they meant to me. And you call that harmless? Victor's face darkened. You want coupons? Fine. I'll pay her debt myself. But your mother wouldn't be proud of this behavior, using grief as a weapon. And there was the line he had always known would hurt most. In my past life I froze. In this one I slapped him. The sound cracked across the room. Victor stumbled, eyes wide. You hit a fellow soldier? Clara shrieked. Victor raised his voice again. If you don't apologize to me and Clara this instant, I'll report you. I'm breaking up with you. You entitled compound girls think we owe you everything. I looked him dead in the eye. Great. Saves me the trouble. The room stilled. As of today, I said clearly, I, Elena Rivers, am done with you. And then, for dramatic measure, I reached into his uniform pocket, where he always kept his monthly rations. I pulled out the stack of food coupons, walked to the kitchen window and slapped them down. From Comrade Lang, I said to the cafeteria staff. Extra food for everyone today. The cook blinked. Then grinned. First come, first served. Cheers erupted. Victor's face turned a shade of purple. You've gone too far, Elena. I turned on my heel. No, Victor. This time I went far enough. He pointed at me. Don't come crawling back. Don't cry to me later and beg me to fix your reputation. I won't. I shrugged. You're not that important. And with that I walked past him. Past Clara, who was frozen like a statue, through a cafeteria of stunned soldiers and straight out into the sunlight. That night in the dorm, Lon sat on her bunk polishing her boots. You really did it, she said without looking up. You stood up to him. I didn't reply. I was too busy wringing out my soup-soaked uniform. He's already telling people you're spoiled, May added from the corner. But no one's buying it anymore. I smiled. Good. The thing about reputations? You don't protect them by being silent. You protect them by burning down the lies trying to suffocate you. Victor Lang might have taken years from my past life, but he wasn't taking a single second of this one. Word of the cafeteria incident spread like wildfire. By nightfall, even the laundry staff were whispering about how Victor Lang had been publicly dumped by the general's daughter and lost a month's worth of food coupons to a spontaneous charity handout. In the past, that kind of humiliation would have sent him into silent brooding. Now Victor was angry. And worse, desperate. He didn't try to confront me again that evening. Not in the dorm halls, not in the mess area, not even in the radio room where he once used to linger and accidentally run into me. Victor waited. He waited until the next day's training drills, where fists could be thrown under the guise of technique, and pain could be dismissed as toughening up. It started during close combat pair drills. The sun beat down on the cement, and our breath fogged in the cold morning air as we lined up, boots in formation, hearts thumping. We were supposed to rotate partners. But Victor made sure he was positioned beside me. "Switch," the squad leader barked. Before I could even react, Victor stepped forward and grabbed my wrist. "Guess we're partners again," he said with a thin smile. I should have reported it. I should have refused. But something in me refused to look weak in front of him. Not now, not after I'd finally found my voice. We stepped onto the sparring mat. Around us, others were mid-spar, pushing, flipping, learning technique. But Victor wasn't here to spar. He was here to punish. "You know," he said as we squared up, "your little show yesterday, brave sure, but unnecessary. Still licking your wounds?" I replied coolly. "Oh, Elena," he said with mock affection, "don't pretend this isn't just your way of getting my attention. You want me back so badly, you humiliated yourself." I said nothing. Just raised my fists ready to begin. And then, he lunged. No warning. No stance. No form. Just brute force. I stepped back instinctively, but he caught my elbow and spun me hard. I landed on the mat, but not the way we were trained to. There was no control in his grip, no support in his fall. He let me hit the ground deliberately. I winced but pushed myself back up. "Sloppy," he muttered. "Can't even fall properly. You really think someone like you can lead a unit?" He came at me again. This time he swept my leg and wrenched my arm behind my back, twisting until my shoulder screamed in pain. Gasps erupted nearby. "Victor, that's enough," someone shouted. "Let go." But Victor didn't loosen his grip. He bent low, his voice a hiss in my ear. "You want to embarrass me in front of the entire base? Fine. Let's see how embarrassed you feel when I break you in half." And then he pulled hard. Pain tore through my leg. I screamed. "Elena has to dance." I heard someone shout. "She's a performer. What are you trying to do, cripple her?" "Lang, let her go," the squad leader shouted, already charging forward. But before he could reach us, something else moved faster. A blur of motion. And then Victor was gone. I blinked, the pressure on my joints suddenly released. I gasped, struggling to sit up, and saw Victor sprawled on the ground several feet away, a boot mark smeared across his chest. Towering over him stood a broad-shouldered man, sleeves rolled, jaw tight with fury. "Wimchen, are you proud of yourself?" he said, voice sharp and biting. "You like hurting women smaller than you? That make you feel like a man?" Victor scrambled to his feet, red-faced. "What's your problem?" "We were sparring." "That wasn't sparring. That was assault." Liam turned to the others, voice loud and clear. "Any soldier who lays hands on a fellow comrade like that doesn't belong on this field." The surrounding crowd, previously silent, erupted into murmurs of agreement. Victor's pride wouldn't let him back down. "You want to fight?" he barked, puffing his chest. "Let's go. Man to man." Liam didn't even flinch. "Gladly." They squared off. I tried to sit up. "Someone help me, Lon maybe." My leg throbbed. My shoulder ached. But I wasn't missing this. Victor charged first, wild and reckless. Liam sidestepped with ease. Another strike. Another dodge. Then, without ceremony, Liam grabbed Victor's collar, swept his legs out from under him, and sent him flying, directly into the mud pit near the field edge. A loud splash. Laughter exploded across the training ground. A few soldiers clapped. Someone even whistled. Victor rose, caked in wet earth, hair dripping. His ego had taken more damage than his body. "Report this, I dare you," Liam said, brushing dirt from his sleeve. "And I'll file my own complaint, with footage. I have witnesses. All of them." Victor looked around. No one came to his defense. Not even Clara, who stood yards away, clutching her canteen like a safety blanket. Liam turned and walked straight toward me. For a moment, everything around us faded. The sun, the chatter, the smell of mud and sweat. He crouched beside me and extended a hand. "Elena Rivers," he said. "You all right?" I stared at him. He looked different. Gone was the thin, runny-nosed boy I remembered from our childhood in the compound. In his place was a commander. A protector. Someone who had just flung my ex-fiancé like a sack of rotten potatoes. I took his hand. His palm was warm, rough with calluses. He helped me stand, gently dusting off my uniform. "You really don't pull your punches," I said, trying to disguise my racing heart. He gave a faint smile. He had it coming. "Don't tell me you went through officer school just to be my personal bodyguard." "I didn't," he said. "But it's a pretty nice bonus." I laughed. More from the shock than the joke. He paused, then added softly, "I'm glad you remembered me. I never forgot you." That wasn't a line. It was the truth. Even in my past life, long after he'd transferred away, I remembered the boy who once saved half his dumpling to share with me. The boy who cried harder than I did when our pet rabbit died. The boy who never got to grow up because he died young, in a campaign he never should have been deployed to. But now he was here. Alive. Strong. Standing between me and the man who nearly broke me. "Thanks," I said, and I meant it more than he could know. He nodded once, still watching me carefully. Then, with a voice only I could hear, he said, "You don't have to look over your shoulder anymore. Not while I'm here." That evening the entire base buzzed with whispers. Victor didn't show up for dinner. Clara did, walking stiffly with a bruised pride and a spoon she barely touched. No one sat beside her. Not even the kind-hearted new recruits who once believed her frailty was charming. As I sat with my tray, Liam passed behind me and dropped a second dumpling on my plate. "Officer's ration," he said casually. I raised a brow. "Is that a bribe?" "No," he said. "It's an apology." "For what?" "For not stepping in sooner." My throat tightened unexpectedly. "You did." He didn't sit with me. He returned to his post like a proper commander, respectful of formality. But I knew deep down that dumpling wasn't the apology. It was a promise. A week passed. Victor kept his distance. Clara stopped pretending to faint near me. The base had shifted. Whispers no longer followed me with suspicion, they followed her. Me. I trained. I slept. I ate dumplings that appeared on my tray without explanation. I laughed with my dorm mates. I stretched every night and nursed the bruises from Victor's failed ambush like medals of honor. I felt alive. And then, on a quiet Thursday evening, Lon burst into the dormitory breathless and grinning. "Elena," she shouted, eyes gleaming. "Come with me. Now." I raised a brow from where I sat cleaning my boots. "What for?" "No questions. Just come." Confused, I followed her across the base toward the recreation hall, an unused training room that smelled like paint and polish most days. But when Lon opened the doors, the lights flared on, and a chorus of voices shouted, "Happy birthday, Elena." I froze. The room was strung with streamers in military colors, deep red and gold, and decorated with makeshift paper stars. A long table had been assembled from crates and benches, covered in dishes I hadn't seen in months. Dumplings, pickled radish, braised pork belly, even canned peaches. At the center was a two-tier cake, icing slightly lopsided but proudly homemade. And beside it stood Liam Chin. He wasn't in uniform. He wore a white button-down with his sleeves rolled and a sheepish smile on his face. I'd never seen him look more disarming or more determined. "You remembered," I said softly. He shrugged. "How could I forget? You used to make such a fuss about birthdays when we were kids." I hadn't celebrated since my first year with Victor, where I brought my own cake and he brought Clara. But tonight, everyone was here. Lon, May, the radio officers, the dance troupe girls, even a few junior commanders. They were smiling, laughing, clinking tin cups of tea. Claire was not here. Victor was not invited. This night was mine. As we ate, my dorm mates recounted old stories, some embellished, some not. We laughed about our training injuries and impersonated the squad leader. Someone tried to teach the dance troupe how to salute with noodles in their mouths. And just when I thought it couldn't get more absurdly perfect, Liam stood and cleared his throat. He held a box, plain brown, no ribbon. "I was going to wait," he said, glancing at me. "But then I realized I've already waited years." He walked around the table, stopping in front of me. "Elena Rivers," he said formally, opening the box. Inside, nestled in cotton, were 2 gold wedding rings. Heavy, thought. Designed not for elegance but for durability. Just like us. "I filed our marriage application the day after you threw soup at your ex," Liam said with a smirk. The room erupted in laughter. He knelt, proper military style, one knee grounded, posture flawless. "I request permission to marry you." There was no grand speech. No flowers. No music. Just his sincerity. His strength. His timing. I reached down and tilted his chin up. "I grant it." Cheers broke out. Someone tossed a napkin in the air. May screamed. Lon sobbed. Liam grinned, slipped the ring on my finger and saluted me. And then, right as I leaned down to kiss his cheek, the front door slammed open. Victor Lang stood at the threshold, panting, eyes wide and furious. Behind him trailed Clara and a few confused young soldiers who must have been dragged along for the spectacle. "Sophie," he snapped. I turned slowly. "I go by Elena now," I said. His jaw tightened. "Come outside. I need to talk to you." A few of my friends rose instinctively, ready to escort him out. I raised a hand. "If you have something to say, Victor, say it here." He hesitated, then squared his shoulders. "You don't want to save face? Fine." He stormed in and jabbed a finger at the cake. This whole thing is just to make me jealous, isn't it?" The room went dead silent. "Men and women in a room," he sneered. "Drinking. Laughing. In the dark. You've really let yourself go. Is that your problem?" Lon snapped. Victor ignored her. "Clara told me. You've been flaunting this relationship to get back at me." "She's your ex," Clara added with venomous sweetness. "Not a war trophy." I stood slowly. "It's my birthday." Victor blinked. "What?" I smiled. "Told. You barged in here, insulted my fiancé, accused me of trying to seduce you, and forgot one important detail. Today's my birthday." His face twitched. "You never told me." "I did. 4 years in a row. You brought Claire every time. First year she shoved my face into the cake. You laughed." Gasps echoed around the room. Victor's mouth opened. Nothing came out. "You don't get to show up now," I continued, "and pretend you ever celebrated me." One of the junior officers stood. "Sir, with respect, you weren't invited. This is a private gathering." Victor didn't move. So Liam did. He stepped forward, standing slightly in front of me. "Any more interruptions," he said calmly, "and I'll consider it harassment." Victor looked at him, then at the cake. Then he reached out to knock it over. My friends moved faster. 4 hands grabbed him at once. "Don't you dare," May hissed. "You're insane," Lon added. "She's happy. For once. Let her be." Victor's fury began to slip into something else. Fear. He stepped back, breathing hard. "Elena," he said. "You've fallen this far?" I walked up to him slowly and leaned in. "You're right," I whispered. "I've fallen right out of your reach." He flinched. And I turned back to Liam, my ring glittering under the light, my friends clapping again, my name echoing in laughter and joy. Victor never got to say another word. Clara yanked his sleeve and pulled him out the door, muttering something about protocol and not worth it. The door closed. And Liam handed me a lighter. "Make a wish," he said softly. I looked at him. At the cake. At the room full of warmth. I already got it. I should have known Victor wouldn't take the hint. A normal man might have retreated after being publicly humiliated on a training field, flung into a mud pit, slapped in a cafeteria, and thrown out of a birthday party. But not Victor Lang. Victor had one fatal flaw. He believed every rejection was an invitation in disguise. So when I walked across the base the next morning to submit my unit leadership nomination papers, I wasn't surprised to find him waiting by the logistics gate. His uniform was spotless, hair slicked back, and he held a file in his hand as if he had real business here. I walked right past him. "Elena," he said sharply. I didn't stop. "Elena," he said again, voice lower, more urgent. "I'm busy," I replied, not slowing. "I need 5 minutes, he insisted, stepping in front of me. "Then you'll need 4 more than I'm willing to give." "Elena, I'm serious." "So am I." His eyes flared. "It's about your nomination." That made me pause. I didn't turn around. What about it? He stepped closer. You need to withdraw. I laughed. Actually laughed. And why would I do that? He straightened his spine. Because you're not ready. And because it's making things difficult. Difficult for who? For Clara, he said. She's been under a lot of stress. You know, she's been trying for that position too. She's having headaches, dizzy spells, she hasn't eaten properly. I turned around fully. Victor. Stop. He blinked. Do you hear yourself? I said. You're asking me to give up a leadership role that I earned, again so Clara can be more comfortable? She's not just anyone, he said, tone softening. She's been under pressure. People talk. If you get the promotion now, it'll look like you're trying to humiliate her after all this. Just let it go. You're right, I said with a nod. His shoulders relaxed slightly. I'm absolutely trying to humiliate her. He stiffened. And you, I added. So congratulations. It's working. Elena. No, I said, voice sharpening. Not this time. I gave up the lead dancer position for Clara once. I gave up the troop leader nomination because you said my mother-in-law needed care. I gave up everything because I loved you. And you took every inch of me until there was nothing left. Victor flinched. You told me I couldn't perform because being lifted on stage by another man would dishonor you. But when Clara was hoisted in front of a crowd, you clapped louder than anyone. You told me we couldn't afford to have children, and now I know you meant you couldn't, not us. He looked away. Elena. Don't say my name like that. His voice cracked. I'm just asking for one thing. One small thing. Then I'm just saying no. Loudly. The silence stretched between us. Then, as if grasping for a final lifeline, he said, You think Liam really cares about your future? About your career? Men like him don't want strong wives. They want trophies. Sooner or later you'll step down for him too. I smiled sweetly. That's funny. Because Liam filed my promotion paperwork himself this morning. Victor went pale. You're lying. I stepped aside. Then keep watching. 2 hours later, the entire base was assembled on the southern parade field. Morning fog still curled around the tents, but the mood was electric. The commander stood on the platform holding a clipboard. 3 candidates are being considered for the new leadership post in Unit 05, he announced. All of them have been thoroughly vetted. But before final selections are made, we'll hear directly from each nominee. My name was called second. As I stepped onto the platform, I could feel every eye on me, including Clara's, who stood near the back, biting her thumbnail like it might save her. Victor stood off to the side, stiff with fury. I took the mic. I joined this base as a performer, I began. I was placed in the cultural unit out of consideration for my father, a general who believed I belonged somewhere safe. A few older officers nodded knowingly. But the truth is, I was never meant to be in the background. I was never made to dance behind others or play second to those with louder voices. I'm a soldier. I've trained. I've bled. And I've been told again and again to sit down so someone else can rise. I looked straight at Victor. But not anymore. Scattered applause broke out. I want to lead Unit 05 not because I crave the spotlight, but because I'm finally ready to stop hiding behind someone else's. Louder applause followed. The commander gave a single approving nod as I stepped down. Just as he was preparing to announce the final vote, a loud voice rang out from the back of the field. I object. Victor. He marched forward, clipboard in hand, face red. I request to speak to the council. I have concerns regarding favoritism. Elena Rivers is the daughter of General Rivers, and her relationship with Commander Chin presents a conflict of interest. That won't be necessary, another voice cut in. He strode up the stage steps like he owned them, pulling a document from his jacket. He handed it to the commander, then turned to the crowd. Since everyone's gathered, Liam said, let me clarify something. I'm not Elena's superior. I'm not her handler. And I'm not using my rank to influence her career. He turned toward Victor. I'm her fiancé. A ripple ran through the crowd. Liam lifted the document. This is our approved military marriage certificate, signed by Central Command. Effective as of this morning. He looked back to the commander. I'm officially recusing myself from the leadership review panel. Elena Rivers earned her nomination through merit, Not through me. The applause that followed was deafening. Victor stood frozen. Claire looked like she might faint. I walked up beside Liam, placed a hand on his arm and smiled. Anything else, Comrade Lang? Victor tried to speak. Nothing came out. He turned and walked off the field. Claire chased after him, tripping in the mud. Me. I stood there in front of the entire base, engaged, nominated, and finally free. Later that night, Liam found me on the barracks steps, nursing a warm cup of tea. You handled him well, he said, sitting beside me. I didn't even punch him this time, I replied. That's growth. He chuckled. Think he'll stop now? No. But I don't care anymore. We sat in comfortable silence. You really submitted the application without telling me? I wanted it to be a surprise. It was. He turned his head toward me. We're really doing this, huh? I looked down at the ring on my finger. No, I said softly. We've already done it. We've just been waiting for the world to catch up. I had seen battle once in my past life. Not with guns or grenades, but in the quiet, bloody way a woman dies while living for someone else. 1,000 tiny cuts, ripped dreams, swallowed insults, compromises dressed as love. But this time I chose the front lines. Because if fate had returned Liam Chin to me, I wasn't going to hide behind stage curtains and choreography again. Not while the man I loved bled in my name in another lifetime. We volunteered together. The official notice was pinned on the barracks bulletin board 2 days after our engagement. Deployment. Border Zone 17. Hostile terrain. Critical movement anticipated. 2 slots available for command-grade officers. I was told not to go. She's General Rivers' daughter, some whispered. She should stay safe. She's just a cultural officer. She just got engaged, why take the risk? But my father didn't stop me. When I walked into his office and placed my hand on the request form, he stared at it for a long time. Then finally he picked up the pen and signed. You truly are my daughter, he said. If you win, I'll be waiting at home. If you fall, his voice caught, I'll bring you back myself. Zone 17 was colder than the maps suggested. Jagged hills carved the horizon, and wind howled through barbed wire fencing like wolves in the dark. We arrived under moonlight, boots crunching over frozen earth, helmets heavy on our heads. Liam was assigned forward field strategy. I was placed in charge of tactical coordination, a temporary command post housed in a hollowed-out radio tent with half-broken antennae and 2 working field medics. It wasn't glamorous, but it was the beating heart of the base. Within a week, I knew every route, every supply line, and every delay in the signal towers. I drafted rescue paths with red chalk, moved backup rations through tunnels, and stood on crates shouting orders louder than men twice my size. Liam dropped by the tent one night, mud on his boots and a thermos in his hand. You've got 5 seconds to drink this before I start forcing it down your throat. I grinned. Is that a threat or a proposal? He sat beside me on a crate. I already proposed. You said yes. Now I get to bully you into staying warm. The tea inside was strong and bitter, but it loosened the knot in my chest. You know, I said quietly, this is where you died. He froze. In my past life, I added. This campaign. He took a bullet to the chest. There was a letter in your pocket, half finished, addressed to me. Liam exhaled slowly. You remembered all that? I lived it. He set the thermos down and reached for my hand. Then let's rewrite it. Together. On the 11th day of deployment, the ambush came. Scouts reported suspicious movement near the southern ridge. Enough to trigger an alert, but not enough to pull reinforcements. Liam and his team moved out at dawn. By sunset, radio silence had fallen. My fingers gripped the edge of the signal table until my knuckles turned white. He's alive, I told myself. Not again. Not this time. The sergeant beside me was already preparing a report. Wait, I said sharply. No distress signal means one of 2 things. Either they're gone, or they're trapped and conserving energy. He hesitated. Commander Rivers, with all due respect. I know Liam, I said. If he was alive but immobile, he'd use flares. If he was overrun, he'd pull back. Then what's your call? I grabbed the field map, scanned the ravines and circled a point near the ridge with a red marker. Here. There's a slope between the cliffs. Shallow enough for cover, steep enough to block transmission. He stared at it. That's a suicide run. Not if we send the drone first. I didn't wait for permission. The recon drone launched 10 minutes later, buzzing over the valley in silence. What it returned made my throat tighten. Liam's team was pinned, 6 soldiers crouched behind overturned vehicles, outgunned and low on supplies. Liam had a tourniquet tied above his knee and blood staining the rock beneath him, but he was alive. "Get me a rescue squad," I said. "Yow." I rode with the lead transport. Wind tore at our faces as we drove through the dust storm. The wheels skidded on loose gravel, but I didn't blink. I could see the ridge from here. And I wasn't losing him again. The firefight had quieted by the time we reached the slope. We scrambled down into the ravine, weapons drawn. Bullets echoed faintly in the distance, but the worst had passed. Liam was slumped against a stone, pale but conscious. When he saw me, he smiled weakly. "Told you I'd grow up strong enough to protect you." "You idiot," I said, tears burning my eyes. "What kind of husband makes his fiancée rescue him? The kind who knows she'll do it better than anyone else." I helped the medic lift him into the truck, cradling his head against my shoulder. He held my hand the entire ride back. By the time we returned to base, the skies were orange with dusk and the camp was alive with chatter. "You brought back the whole team," the sergeant said in disbelief. "No casualties," the medic confirmed. Liam's wound was deep, but it would heal. Me. I walked into the command tent that night, submitted a detailed map of the rescue route, and placed a revised tactical procedure on the general's desk. 2 days later, I was awarded first-class military merit. The ceremony was brief but packed. The performance troupe opened with a patriotic song, and for the first time since I was 18, I stood not behind the curtain, but in front of it. The lights blazed across my face as I stepped onto the stage, uniform pressed, medals gleaming. From the back row, Liam stood clapping, a crutch under one arm and a grin that melted every bruise in my heart. The crowd roared as my name was announced. Elena Rivers for tactical excellence and frontline leadership, recipient of the Hero's Medal. I bowed. It was the same stage Clara Wu once stood on while Victor clapped for her like she was the sun. But tonight the lights were mine. After the ceremony, the banquet began. The girls from my old dorm crowded around, teasing and giggling. "Elena, look at you. Our squad leader could never." "Forget dancer. You're battlefield royalty now." Lon handed me a dumpling. "We saved you the biggest one. Hero's privilege." May elbowed her. "Also because Liam bribed the chef." I laughed and turned toward him. Liam was seated nearby, his leg wrapped, his posture relaxed. He raised his cup in my direction. "To rewriting fate," he mouthed. I raced mine back. "To finally becoming the woman I was never allowed to be." You'd think people like Clara Wu and Victor Lang would learn when to quit. But some people don't fall until they trip over their own lies. The medal ceremony had barely ended when whispers began trickling across the base. Whispers that started in the locker rooms, floated through the cafeteria, and landed squarely in the inbox of the disciplinary committee. The whispers had one name. Apparently, a sergeant had stumbled across her credentials during a standard background review. Her medical exemptions, academic claims, and previous unit assignments. None of it quite added up. "I heard she forged her college transcripts," Lon muttered during lunch. "I heard she faked a knee injury to skip field exams," May added. "She got into the base's cultural division under a false recommendation," someone else said. I didn't comment. I didn't have to. Because truth has a nasty habit of surfacing when the liars get lazy. And Clara had gotten very, very lazy. A week after my award ceremony, a notice was posted on the board outside the main hall. An internal investigation had been launched against Officer Clara Wu. She was suspended from duty pending review. Victor's name wasn't on the notice, but his silence spoke louder than paper ever could. I saw him that afternoon. He was limping, barely, and yelling at a transport driver near the training grounds. "You call this brake maintenance?" he barked, voice wild. "This is garbage." I didn't think much of it. Until 20 minutes later I heard the crash. A malfunction during terrain testing. Victor's Jeep had flipped into a trench after the brakes gave out. He survived, but his knee was shattered. By sunset he was transferred to the base medical center and placed under permanent non-combat status. Just like that, the man who once sneered at my physical fitness test was removed from active service. I visited the hallway once. Not for him but because my unit's medical logs had to be submitted to the same wing. I passed his room. He looked like a shell. No uniform, no medals, no Clara at his bedside. Just Victor Lang, the once golden son of the South Command, now reduced to paperwork and painkillers. He didn't look up when I passed. I didn't stop. Clara, meanwhile, was unraveling at record speed. They called her in for questioning 3 days later. I watched from the window of the admin office as she stood outside, wringing her hands. When she caught sight of me, she rushed over. "Elena," she said breathlessly. "Please, I didn't mean any harm. Those papers were they were adjusted." So, everyone does it. Everyone lies on government documents? I said, eyebrow raised. "I didn't lie," she snapped. "I just needed a head start. You had everything handed to you. Your father's a general. And yours was a banker who donated to every military fund within 100 miles, I interrupted. "Save the excuses. You're doing this to me," she hissed. "You've always hated me." "I don't hate you, Clara." She flinched. "I don't think about you at all." Her lip quivered. "The problem is," I continued, "you think everyone owes you forgiveness. But all you ever did was cheat, lie, and take credit for work you never did. And now that it's falling apart, you're scrambling to blame everyone but yourself. I made one mistake." "No, you made 100. And the only difference now is, someone finally noticed." Before she could answer, the investigation officer called her name. She turned without another word. I never saw her on base again. A week later, both Clara and Victor were formally discharged. Victor on a medical exemption. Clara under administrative expulsion. The notice was pinned below my hero's medal citation on the board. No one laughed. No one jeered. Everyone just read and nodded. It was justice. Quiet and simple. Exactly the way I wanted it. I thought that would be the end of the story. But life had one more surprise for me. It started with nausea. I chalked it up to fatigue at first. Maybe dehydration or the change in altitude during our post-deployment drills. Then came the dizziness. The strange cravings. The emotional swings. The final clue was when May handed me a boiled egg and I nearly cried from joy. "You're weird," she said. "No, I'm just hungry," I mumbled, then threw up in the bathroom 20 minutes later. I didn't tell Liam right away. Instead, I snuck out on a weekend pass and visited the base medical center. The nurse smiled at the results. "Congratulations, Commander Rivers. You're 7 weeks pregnant." I stared at her. 7. Would have been just after you returned from the ridge. My heart slammed into my ribs. The ridge. The rescue. The night Liam brought me tea and whispered that we were rewriting fate. Apparently we'd rewritten a lot more than that. I walked along the base trail that evening, the soft hum of dusk surrounding me, hand pressed against my abdomen. Life. Inside me. My second life had already bloomed from the ashes of the first. And now a third was blooming inside me. This time I would not give anything up. Not for a man. Not for a medal. Not for a tradition that told me women must sacrifice to be loved. I didn't need to choose between power and peace. I had both. Liam found me by the training fence, arms folded, leaning lazily against the post. "You've been quiet," he said. "I had a lot to think about." He walked closer. "Do I get to know what about?" I nodded, then reached into my jacket pocket and handed him the envelope. He opened it. Then looked at me. Then looked again. "Elena." His voice broke. "I wanted to tell you sooner," I whispered. "I just wanted to make sure I wasn't dreaming." He pulled me into his arms. "I don't care if it's a dream," he said against my hair. "Just don't wake me." That night, as I lay beside him in our shared quarters, the wind outside softened and my heartbeat settled. Victor and Claire were gone. My name was spoken with honor. My body was carrying the future. And for once in my life, no one could take it from me. I gave birth on a Tuesday morning just after the sun rose. The window of the base clinic was open, and the scent of dew and wild grass drifted in. Outside, birds were chirping. Inside, the nurses were shouting at Liam to please wait outside, and Liam was, unsurprisingly, arguing that he had led military offensives, so surely he could stand next to his wife in labor. The doctor didn't even look up. "Commander or not," she said firmly, "your wife is pushing out a human being. Kindly take your dramatics outside." He did barely. I didn't scream. Not because it didn't hurt, but because this pain wasn't suffering. This was creation. This was beginning. This was the opposite of the pain I had once felt dying in a hospital bed, discarded by the man I gave my life to, forgotten even in my final breath. This time I was heard. This time I was seen. And when they placed the baby in my arms, red and warm and squirming, I looked down at her tiny face and smiled. "Welcome to the world," I whispered. "You were born to a mother who chose herself." We named her Alara, after the brightest moon in the darkest sky. Her eyes were Liam's, calm, intelligent, unshakably steady. Her nose was mine. Her lungs, however, were her own. She howled like a general on day one. By the end of the week, we were discharged from the clinic and welcomed back to base housing with red banners and homemade sweets. Commander Elena Rivers, hero of the Southern Ridge, now mother of the next general, they teased. Liam carried Alara on his chest like a medal. And I breathed. For the first time in both my lives, I wasn't running or proving or performing. I was simply existing. Proudly. Fully. Joyfully. Of course, Victor and Clara tried to crawl back. The military grapevine reported that Clara had tried to join a civilian PR firm, but her forged documents followed her there. No institution wanted her name on their roster. Last I heard, she was living with distant relatives in a tiny suburb, giving online dance lessons to middle schoolers who didn't know better. Victor fared worse. His injury had never fully healed. And with no medals, no deployment records, and no command prospects, he became nothing more than a footnote in the archives of once promising officers. He tried to contact me once. Sent a letter. Said he was sorry. Said he regretted everything. Said he still thought about me. I burned it. Not out of rage, but because there was simply no space for that version of myself anymore. I was no longer the girl who needed his apologies. I was Elena Rivers. Mother, soldier, and survivor. After my maternity leave, a formal letter arrived. It was from the National Defense Office. They were offering me a promotion, commanding officer of the newly established Strategic Planning Division. It would mean more visibility, more responsibility, and a full relocation to the capital. Liam was already due for reassignment there. We accepted together. When we arrived in the capital, a full honor guard greeted us at the gate. Alara, swaddled in Liam's arms, sneezed mid-anthem. The soldiers cracked grins and Liam whispered, "Our daughter just sneezed on protocol." "She takes after me," I replied proudly. The house we moved into wasn't large, but it had a garden. And in that garden I planted my first rose bush with my own hands. Not for Victor. Not even for Liam. But for the girl I once was. The girl who danced for praise. The girl who endured for love. The girl who gave up her dreams so someone else could succeed. She died in a hospital bed, anonymous and aching. And was reborn in the snow, holding her own hand. Alara's first birthday came quickly. She could already stand by then, stubbornly, noisily, and often in the middle of Liam's early morning briefings. My father visited with a tiny uniform sewn just for her. "For the future," he said. "And because she scares her babysitters." Alara tried to eat her own badge. As Liam and I watched her wobble around the cake table, I leaned against his shoulder. "We rewrote everything, didn't we?" I whispered. He kissed the top of my head. "And we're still writing." They held a formal banquet that same month, honoring my appointment as the youngest strategic division head in modern history. There were speeches, flash photography, a long line of officials with carefully worded compliments. And at the end of the night, the president himself stood beside me and said, "Your story is one of the finest examples of what true service looks like." Thanked him. Then looked at the golden plaque in my hand. Read, "Elena Rivers, for distinguished military excellence." Not Mrs. Lang. Not Victor's former fiancé. Not the dancer turned officer. Just me. My name. My title. My story. As I left the hall that night, Liam waiting with Alara asleep in his arms, I paused one last time under the massive dome lights and looked around. So many faces. So many lives. So many paths I could have taken. But didn't. Because the day Andrew, no Victor, left me behind, I thought it would be the end of my story. But it was only the prologue. The end.